evening and welcome. The Fijian Elections Office is soon due to launch their 4-year strategic plan, and to discuss this tonight, we're joined by the Supervisor of Elections, Mr. Mohammed Sanin. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. So the last time we spoke to you was right after the elections. There were so many things happening. I think the Fijian Elections Office since then has had time to sort of take a step back, take a breather, and review a lot of things that happened during the 2018 election and plan as well. And I guess that's where this strategic plan is coming from. But before we discuss or go on to this, talk to us about the post-election process.
Thank you, Ziad. It's good to be back on the show. Also at a very critical time. Speaking about the last election, there were lots of lessons learned. It was also the first time we ran an election based on the current platform, having had 4 years' time to prepare for it. As you know, the 2014 election just gave us 6 months to get the whole operations in order and out to deliver. So based on that period of preparations, we were able to carry out a few projects. Some were quite, as you could say, daring projects, such as our app, the result dissemination app, as well as some other programs that were designed to stabilize a lot of the processes. So now that we've had the experience of running one election, the staff in the office have had the same experience. Fiji itself has had an experience of an election that was organized with a 4-year time frame, where we carried out a thorough review of all the activities and all the processes, and then we came up with the outcomes of the review that will now form the basis of the next 4 years.
So a lot of people are under the impression that the Fijian Elections Office only comes into action once every 4 years, but that's not necessarily the case, right? After the elections, what processes do you follow? Well,
the general understanding that Elections Office doesn't have anything to do after an election stems from the fact that previously the Elections Office would get disbanded after the election. And then it would only be set up again just before an election. So every time something like that happened and the election happened, you'd have observers coming in and commenting to say Fiji should take a more cycle-based approach because there is heaps of stuff that has to be done in between the election, so that when it comes to election time, those small processes do not create big problems. So based on that, I think the current political understanding as well as the laws require us to be ongoing in terms of our activities, and that's what we do.
So let's move in a little bit into the strategic plan itself. The last time that it was launched, it was a 5-year plan. This time it's a 4-year plan. Why the shortening of that particular strategic plan?
So in 2015, when we made the first plan, it was 5 years because we needed to conduct the election and go beyond the election into the review phase and then come up with ideas for the next plan. The Fijian electoral cycle is 4 years. Elections take place latest 4 years. So based on that cycle, we have now realigned the term of the plan so that we match with the cycle, and then post-election we will still have time to do the review and up with the next plan.
So a year on from the 2018 election, the FEO has also had time to reflect on the Multinational Observer Group report. What's the procedure, or what processes have you followed to ensure that the strategic plan reflects what the MOG report recommends?
Yes. The 2018 General Election Observer report covers quite an extensive bit in terms of the theories around elections. A lot of the tests on the election was done based on the theories on elections, on how certain processes on elections should be done versus how the FEO did it. And if one reads the observer report, they will find that the observers actually found that a lot of the processes actually were meeting the theoretical requirements. And I think we did a talkback show as well, covering on the aspects of free and fair election. So based on that, the observers have come up with recommendations. And these recommendations were actually then considered by the FEO, together with the extensive review that we carried out. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but the Fijian Elections Office also had an internal audit team running a full internal compliance check of every process that we ran in the last election. And they also prepared a report, which we then used for the purposes of our internal planning in terms of what processes need to be modified in which manner so that the efficiency improves, so that the delivery improves. And that's how we came up with various activities that needed to be done in the next 4 years. So the MOG report gave us a set of recommendations, our internal review gave us a set of recommendations, and then we combined all of it together to prepare for the next 4 years.
So essentially in the time from when elections was over, post-elections till now, the FEO has been quite busy in terms of planning out every single process that will go on from now until the next elections. Talk to us about the strategic plan itself. What are some of the new initiatives?
So the strategic plan is quite comprehensive. There is various ways of doing strategic plans. We have adopted a strategic plan as well as have incorporated a bit of operations plan in it. So a strategic plan has listed key milestones for the next 4 years that the office needs to achieve. And the milestones that we have identified broadly this time. In the last plan it was very, very detailed. This time we have had some broad milestones. That is because now that the office has been ongoing for the last 5 years, we can classify certain activities or work in the office as ongoing instead of new projects. So our strategic plan this time mostly captures the new projects, and we have plans to develop an online register for political parties. So at any point in time, you can go online and you can know who's the registered officer of a particular party. This document is required by law to be kept in the form of a book, and so we will be publishing that online, and updates to the register will have to be done by the parties to ensure it's more current. We will also be developing, instead of an annual plan, there will be a 4-year strategy for voter registration. We have one of the highest rates of enrollment of voters, meaning registrations, because we target secondary school students. As soon as they become eligible, we register them. So this time around, we will be doing a 4-year plan for that. Yeah.
Stay with us. When we come back from our break, we'll discuss more on the 2020-2023 strategic plan.
So Mr. Saneem, before we get into the objectives and also some of the initiatives that have been set forth in the strategic plan, for those who tend to only pay attention to the electoral system in the country, whenever it is election year, how about a little refresher for them?
Yes, the Fijian electoral system is actually a modified open list proportional system. Getting straight to how results work, in our country, the candidates in a party are nominated by that party directly, and the party, because it's a one constituency, the party nominates its total number of candidates on the day of nomination together. And once the nomination is approved, that's the total number of candidates for that party. And then all the candidates of that party have to go and contest the election and win votes, and then the votes that they win will determine how they rank in the party. So if the party gives us a list and says person A will rank lower than person D in our list, but ultimately when they go to election and person A gets more votes than the person in D, they will rank higher than that person. So that's the ranking when they provide the list to us. But the ultimate ranking is decided by the number of votes the candidates receive. So there's a competition within the party itself. This is what is an open list. The initial list is only used for determining the hierarchy of candidates if there's a draw. So what happens once the election is over? The total votes for each candidate contributes to the total for the party. And once the total for the party is arrived at, thereafter there is a 5% threshold in the constitution. We go to that total votes and see if the the votes for that party meet the threshold. So if the votes meet the threshold, then the party goes on to seat allocation. If it doesn't meet the threshold, the party is eliminated from the seat allocation. So the seat allocation system is based on a D'Hondt formula. It's a very widely used formula around the world. Mathematically, it's very simple, but it's difficult to explain in English, like all mathematicians say. So based on the D'Hondt formula, the party ultimately wins seats. It's not the candidates in the party that win seats yet. It's the party that wins the seat. So, for example, in Fiji, the Fiji First won 27 seats. We did not mention which candidate in Fiji First won the seat number 5, seat number 6. No. It's the party that wins the seat. Once the seat numbers for the parties are decided, then we go back to the list after the results and count that many candidates from the top of the list to the lowest number of votes. And those are the candidates that go into parliament. And that's why in our system it's an open list. And you win seats proportional to the number of votes you've received in totality.
This is
Yes.
something that became quite contentious during the
Yes.
last election.
Yes.
I know, for example, Fiji First, who had the highest number of seats, allowed for some members of parliament to be taken in who did not have as many votes as some other parties. Now, it seems that a lot of people did understand the system, but they weren't happy with the way it was producing results. Is there an alternative to this?
Okay, so first I want to just explain why this system produces that kind of results. This system is allowing popular candidates to get candidates who may not be so popular into parliament. Now, in a country like ours, where historically we've had low number of women represented in parliament, this parliament is currently having the highest representation of women. And if you look at the lists from the last election of those women in parliament, a lot of the women have been drawn into parliament because of the votes that were drawn in by more popular candidates in that party. So whilst some people may not agree with the system saying, okay, so someone just received votes X number and is in parliament, but the party is what is the player in this system. The team, it's the team. So if a team, just like soccer, you would say, if a team scores 5 goals, the whole team is credited, right? So same here, the parties won that many seats, so now that many people from that party go in. So that's how this system allows for more marginalized representation, for more inclusive representation. So in fact, the party could even field candidates. Like in Australia, they have candidates, if they feel that, okay, women will not be represented if they contest the election because they might not win that many votes. So they try starting with seats that they know are winnable seats, and that's why they have contestants that were women. That's how in Australia they started with improving the representation rate. But in Fiji, our system itself at the moment draws in candidates. And that's a beauty. You'd be surprised, actually. Those people who are actually critiquing the system would also be surprised that a lot of countries aspire to have a system like this. There are countries in the region that have no women in parliament. And then we have 2 things were recorded in the last election. We had more women contesting the election compared to history. And then there was more women represented in parliament, which is also comparable to the history where 2014, 2018 resulted in more women. It's also something that we should recognize is that the number of women candidates contesting the election also increased in the last election. So I think we're progressing in the right direction, and this system is helping to promote better contests.
Now, on that note, in terms of being progressive and looking at those who would only be focused on the bottom line, we still happen to see on social media there are people who are still trying to discredit the government of the day, members of parliament, and even the Fijian Elections Office in certain posts that they make. in terms of that, how is the FEO planning to counter those who would try to discredit them? Is there any way that anyone else can come up with the same results that the FEO does?
Well, thank you. I will speak for the Fijian Elections Office only. The Fijian Elections Office brought about extremely high levels of transparency in the last election. If you switch off from your blinding thoughts and you just evaluate the election, the last election, on a plain basis, you will realize that there is an extremely high level of transparency in everything that the FEO did. I mean, for example, in a country like Australia, the results on the night are all temporary, and then they bring back all the ballot papers and they count it again at the election official's office, and they count all the results again. They count all the ballot papers again, and then the results are final after 14 days or 21 days. In Fiji, we put a camera at the count center, which was live 24/7 for people to see that counting is happening, counting has finished. We put cameras at the packing center, so that 24/7 you could actually see packing was happening. Now, to take it to the next level, this was something the observers asked me. They said, why did you tell everybody where the exchange points are for the ballot boxes? What if the ballot boxes are stolen from there? Or what if somebody tries to attack the staff who are taking that action? Because it's very unsafe. The most secure item is the ballot box. And then we have published now where we're going to change hands from the staff to the next set of staff. And that's where it is the most insecure point, because it can be compromised. So we told them that this is because we want to ensure there's 100% transparency. And we did that. So for the next election, what is Transparency 2.0? Well, Transparency 2.0 is going to be verifiability.
But that's an accounting term.
It's an accounting term. The Fijian Elections Office.
We'll get to that when we come back from our next break. Stay with us. So, in the last segment, we finished off with this phrase, verifiability. That's part of the strategic plan. Tell us more about this pillar.
So, verifiability has been introduced by the Fijian Elections Office in its guiding principles. Essentially, as you would know from accounting or auditing terms, that it is where the Fijian Elections Office will mechanize its processes so that even if someone else executes their tasks, the results will be the same. So, in simple terms, I count the ballot box in the manner in which we have designed the counting process to be, which is very thorough, very accurate, and then I hand over the same ballot box in a secure environment for, say, you to count. And I am going to be confident that once you finish counting, whichever method of counting you use, once you finish, your result will be exactly the same as the results that we have come up with. And that will be the same for all our processes. Elections is a lot of numbers. Apart from the ballot paper having numbers, that would be there's other numbers such as the number of postal ballots, the number of voters. It's all fixed. And in mathematics, these things are going to be provable. Now, we don't have half a vote. So we don't deal in half, quarter, 1/3. It's one or the next. So that is how we intend to use verifiability. So if we have published something, we would be able to put that to the test. Some of the features of this were present in the last election, and I think it was possible. Like when the results were announced, there were questions raised by a group of politicians that the results for particular venues were incorrect. And I went and I actually obtained the paper records from that particular venue and then the screenshots of the FEO app. And I actually put it together for the media, and I said, okay, this is This is what was on the paper, pink sheet, white sheet. FAO has published this versus what the party officials had actually said. And it was immediate conclusion there that there was 2 documents plus the FAO app which was giving out the same results versus something that was put up by them which was incorrect. So that in effect was verifiability in action. So now we have recognized that as a guiding principle. We're calling it Transparency 2.0. And we're looking forward to building a lot of that in all our processes, a lot of that, so that you can be confident that if this figure is released by the FAO, that figure can be tested and verified. And I can ask you to test and verify it, and I will walk away from there knowing that it's already done and dusted.
So there's no one looking over anyone else's shoulder to make sure that it's done in this particular manner.
Yes.
Let's look at a few other things. The one thing on everyone's mind the moment they see you, Mr. Saneem, or the organization that you represent is, when is the next elections? Do you have any framework or any particular time frame that you're looking at?
Yes, the next election can be held as in 2022, and the last date the election can be held is the 9th of January 2023. So 6 months early, 9th of July is the day the writ can be issued, and 9th of January is the last day the election can take place.
So let's look
At
at
the, at the moment, the discretion lies with the Prime Minister, right?
Yes.
So last elections, there was a bit of, I guess, this cloud of uncertainty when the Prime Minister wasn't announcing it. Of course, that is his discretion. But then the issue that a lot of people had was, why is there a cloud of uncertainty? Why is the process not more transparent? Why can't the Prime Minister just reveal the date so that political parties can also plan accordingly?
Well, I think it's a question best put to the relevant authorities. But from an elections point of view, and looking at our history, it has always been like that. The Prime Minister has a choice of date. And it has always been that. And this is one of those things in elections or in a democracy that we'll have to get used to.
Right.
The Prime Minister, whoever is Prime Minister, has that advantage, you could say, or has that authority to decide when they wish to take the country to elections.
Let's look at something else that has been a thorn in the FAO side, is people always harping on about the key recommendations from the Multinational Observer Group's report. Has the new 4-year strategic plan reflected some of the recommendations?
In fact, as I said, the strategic plan development process was based around the MOG report, as well as our own FAO's reports. The joint report by the Supervisor of Elections and the Electoral Commission also had recommendations. One of the key things that we have as the SOE and the EC in our joint report recommended that the laws be amended so that the election process is actually divided over 4 years. And if it is divided over 4 years, then things like the provisional voter list will actually be available 2 years in advance or a year in advance. So a lot more time. In 2018, we spent a good 3 months every weekend. We spent a good 3 months every weekend asking people, come and update your details, come and update your details. If you had changed your details, this is the time to update it. And then on election day, people were calling me from Nendi and saying, brother, I forgot to update my detail. I'm still in Nendi, but I have to vote in Vatuanga Primary. So this is the time for people to update their details. We are expiring the cards, and perhaps that is one of the other important announcements.
Yeah, because when you announced it, there was quite a lot of backlash on it.
Yes.
So when we come back from our next break, we'd like to definitely discuss that. Stay with us. So the new voter card and the expiry of the old card, tell us about why this move is being done.
Yes. To be honest, a lot of the people who got registered in 2012 have now, because they have been regularly using these cards, they have already started to change the card because their photos are now outdated or their details are outdated. Also, at the time they registered in 2012, they did not have the opportunity to choose a venue. And this venue, the venues for the elections are now formalized, and we can now allow people to choose the venue. We still have situations where husband and wife are voting in different schools. And why? Because we never changed our details. So by expiring the green colored voter card, voters will now have to change this. And if someone does not update their details or does not change the card, then the card is expired. Yeah.
So these are the cards. So if someone updated their details before, just before the 2018 elections, they don't need to worry.
Yes, you'll
It's
already
just
have a
the-
blue card.
Okay.
Yes.
But there's nothing new that's going to be introduced in there, no sort of personal information outside of whatever is needed to change already in your existing Voter 2.0 cards.
The voter cards that we are now issuing will also list your polling venue.
Okay.
So you don't have to text to 1500 to find out what your venue is. It will be written on your card. Yes.
The government recently, a few weeks ago, announced a single national identity card. Is there scope for the voter ID card to become the national identity card? I mean, so there's this one post that I saw on social media which says, why do we have to have so many cards?
Yes. Well, at the moment, this is the position currently. The voter card is your primary means to get on the voters list. If you don't have a voter's card, that means you're not registered, right? And to get on the voters list, you need a voter card. Now, if you are registered and you have lost your voter card, to know what is your polling venue, you need to know your voter number. So my voter number is 2206-845-00060. Would you recall yours?
No.
Right, so that's my daily job. So I recall my voter number. Now, this is where voters need to update and renew their voter card. We are not asking you to use your voter card on a daily basis. You can keep it nicely in a drawer and use it every 4 years. Now, what is happening is the voter card is now recognized as a universal ID in Fiji. It's gone to such an extent that if you go somewhere and they need your ID, they'll just say, give me your voter card.
Yep.
They will not say, give me an ID, they'll say, give me your voter card. So this year, I was looking at an email yesterday, we have had about 29,000 cards replaced. And this is not an election year, and we have just announced the replacement about a month ago. So 29,000 cards have already been replaced. That means Fijians are actually using the voter card on a day-to-day basis. Now, what will happen when the national ID card comes? Of course, the national ID card, you can use it to vote. Details of how the card will work are still being finalized. Once it is released, we'll know and we can explain further. Now, for now, the voter card is used as a universal ID. It is in the interest of every voter to update their details on it. Yes.
Let's look at the voters themselves. Two things. The first one, the voter list. You mentioned before that there is going to be an external audit of the voter list. Why is this going to happen?
So the Multinational Observer Group report asked the FEO to test the National Register of Voters. So to test the National Register of Voters, they said, look at an independent audit. We are going to prepare for the independent audit because we have introduced now verifiability. Right? We are confident of the voter list. Now, the couple of things in there is the responsibilities of the voter itself. A lot of the students who registered to vote in the schools gave their home address. So they were listed in venues closer to their homes. However, now, it's 3 years, they are now in university. So they need to update their card so that they can vote near the university. So these are some of the schematics around this thing. And this is where I think the announcement of the election date is also important because students who are in universities, a good 6,000 to 8,000 of them,
Right.
they would return home if the university is closed. Exams are over, they would return home. So some of these mechanics need to be ironed out.
If we can look at some more recommendations from the MOG report. One of the very interesting recommendations was that there's a tendency that the roles of the Electoral Commission and the Line Ministry and the Commissioner tend to be a bit muddled. I'm wondering if that has been inculcated in the legal framework of the strategic plan, and before that, whether you agree with that or not.
Well, the role of the minister and the Electoral Commission and the supervisor of elections is pretty clear. Should you choose to accept it? Now, it's political gain if you repeatedly say that it's all mixed up. A lot of the things in the last election that were raised as issues was for political gain, either to discourage voters from voting or to cast doubt on the electoral process even before it took place. So in this case, the responsibility of the minister is to approve observers and to approve if the Fijian Elections Office wishes to hire a person who's not a Fijian citizen. And that's the two roles that the minister plays. The Electoral Commission has overall responsibility of the whole process. They are the guardians of the election. They are my bosses. So there is no confusion. But it's good for political gain to muddle it up and say, okay, it's all over the place and blah, blah, blah. And then it's just misleading. We've had 2 elections under this framework. The framework has been there since 2014. People will now get more used to it. They'll get more used to it. A lot of the false statements, the misstatements, the false fake news and all this that was being propagated before will face stiff challenge this time. Because people now know. I mean, one of the examples there is that people were so scared about what will happen when we go inside the polling station in 2018.
Was that possibly one of the reasons why voter turnout was lower than compared to 2018? Sorry, 2014?
We had bad weather too. But this is one of the things. A very educated person said, man, I was worried when I go to vote. What's going to happen? And I said, so? Well, I went in there and I was out in 2 minutes. It was still the same as 2014. So because there was rampant false news about this, it discouraged a lot of people from actually going out and exercising their freedom. And this is some of the things that now, if someone tells the same person, hey, you're going to have difficulty in voting, he's going to turn around and say, enough of this.
Right.
Yes.
Now that you mention it, this is something really interesting that we actually haven't found the time to discuss on the show, that is the spread of misinformation around elections, and that threatens an election, it threatens democracy itself. So when we come back in our final segment after this break, we'll discuss fake news and the effect that it could potentially have on our elections. Stay with us. So during the 2018 election, there was a lot of misinformation that we saw going around on social media, mainstream media sites. One of the worst examples of this can be seen in, for example, the US elections, where a lot of political pundits are worried what's going to happen next year when there's even threats of foreign interference. And that is also done on an online forum. Do you foresee something like that happening in Fiji, and does the strategic plan take that into account?
Well, one of the things we want to do is we want to build capacity of our secondary stakeholders, such as the NGOs, the CSOs, community youth groups, faith-based organizations, politicians, political parties. I was at a forum 2 weeks ago, and I actually challenged that forum. It was a forum on enhancement of women's participation. I've challenged that forum. I said, I challenge that all the female contestants of an election, members of parliament, get together and sign a pact that even though we represent different political parties, political ideologies, we will stand together to fight against attack on women candidates, their dignities, their families, their histories. If that is something that can be attained, then we can push forward for greater participation. None of the political parties actually published to the FEO their exact social media code of conduct when we asked for it last election. One of them said to me, it's not in the law, so I don't have to give it to you. But this is where the candidates need to start to take it upon themselves to actually stop this. There are various ways of this thing happening. If you own a page, and your page is the one where people come and spread false news, what responsibility are you taking of removing it? What responsibility? There are numerous examples of people who actually enjoy these kinds of things, that my page is becoming more and more viral. But in fact, where is your responsibility? That is why people analyze you based on what's appearing on your pages. False news. The Fijian Elections Office Facebook page is always asked questions. People actually bring to us if someone makes a fake news or fake story, and we actually clarify it. Some media organizations also do the same. They bring it to us and say, what about this? So I think the treatment for this illness of false information lies in prevention, as well as it lies in responsibility. And very soon, I think there's a Hoaxbusters page on website, a TV program here on FBC. I think very soon people will start with name and shame. And soon that is going to create this kind of awareness. It's a small country. Facebook will take its time to come to Fiji.
Now,
it's still dealing with the US.
Said, due to the adverse weather conditions last year, the election day itself, the voting had to be postponed, and there was quite a lot of controversy surrounding that, especially since the media blackout was still in place. There were those that were in certain social circles with something to gain that were saying that the date for the elections was purposefully set around that particular adverse weather condition period. Now, to combat this, how is your strategic plan going to put in place some contingency plans?
Well, speaking of the last election, the weather was terrible. But what happened was on the 14th of November, we had terrible weather. But on the 15th of November, we had athletics at the National Stadium because it was bright and sunny. So the next election, let me forewarn the whole country that the next election has partially got the cyclone season within the dates. And there will be adverse weather in that time. We're currently in November, and we're already having unpredictable weather, rain, sun, rain, sun. So let's get prepared for this. You would remember I was saying, don't forget your umbrella.
Right.
Even before the election, the blue man was carrying an umbrella saying, don't forget your umbrella. And it did happen that on election day it rained. So as a country, I think we can't ignore part of the year just because we might have rain. I think what we need to do is get prepared for it. It's the one time we get to exercise our right to choose our governance. And that's what we should do.
So we've just about run out of time for this particular segment, but let's look at the FEO app. Yes. What's the update on that?
Well, the FEO app is now reaching new heights. We are the highest downloaded app in the country. Of course, it was because this last year was an election. We have updated the app. We have updated the app now. We've put the calendar for the 2022-23 general election. You can actually put in your dates and see when the election can fall. We've also now added the seat allocation formula on the app, so you can put in your own numbers, mock numbers, to see who can win how many seats based on these numbers that you actually do. So usually the confusion was around how can we calculate the number of seats, but the app now does it for you. Please update your app. If you cannot update it, remove it from your phone, delete it, and then reinstall it. But that's the update on the app. I think the new features are very exciting. You can sit all day and calculate theories on how the next election can pan out, or how you can, as a candidate, influence then the outcome of the next election. Thank you.
Very last question.
Yes.
When can we expect this to go public, the strategic plan?
The strategic plan will be live from the 14th of November, which is the anniversary of the last election, and we're looking forward to it. It will be available online on our website, as well as we'll be publishing it through social media pages as well. So 14th of November, mark the date.
Mr. Saneem, thank you so much for joining us.
Naka.
And unfortunately, that's all we have time for on the show tonight. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening.